Hey guys, so we've got chapter 2, part 2 today. So before we focused on the southern colonies, now we're going to move up to the New England colonies and work our way down to the middle colonies, and that'll make the three main regions of the colonies. So when we talk about New England, it's going to be founded by Puritans. So where the Puritans come from is this branch of Protestantism in Europe called Calvinism. So it's led by John Calvin. There he is. They believe in something called predestination, which is this idea that it's predetermined whether or not you are one of these visible saints, whether you are chosen by God or not. So the Puritans believe that the church has become too corrupt. They think that they need to purify, hence the name Puritans. And they want only these visible saints, these chosen ones, to be able to be allowed in the Church of England. They don't like all these Catholic traditions that are still in the church, so they're going to try to purify the church in England. There's another group of Puritans who want to totally split away. They don't think it can be purified from within, so they want to leave altogether. We call them the separatists. So part of the reason they leave is because the king, James I, is not a fan of these Puritans, because if they're going to challenge him as the leader of the church, the leader in religion, he fears that there would be a challenge to his role as king. So the separatists flee, they run away. Hopefully at least one or two of you out there understand my Monty Python meme there, but if you don't, it's okay. So they flee to Holland, they run away to get away from England and the persecution under James I. They don't like the influence of the Dutch culture on their children, so they decide to secure a charter under the Virginia Company to go to the colonies. 102 passengers on the Mayflower, which you've learned about since you were a little kid celebrating Thanksgiving. They arrive in December of 1620. They miss their target. They were supposed to arrive a lot further south under the Virginia Company charter, but they miss. They land at Plymouth. They decide, it's good enough. Let's just stay here. So technically they're squatters. They don't have right to the land. They're just sitting on it. And the Bible is going to govern their laws, everything about their society. That's what we see a lot of in New England, is they are religiously based societies. Everything about their society is focused around religion. A very important document, that's why it's a red term here, Mayflower Compact. It is written on the boat, the Mayflower, as they're coming to the New World. It allows for town meetings, so it's like an early form of self-government. You'll see several examples of this throughout this chapter, of early forms of self-government, setting that precedent for what's to come later. It allows adult males to participate in town meetings. They also elect their governor. That's him right here, William Bradford. What this document says, first of all, they do pledge loyalty to the king. So kind of like that Jamestown Charter, they're still technically Englishmen. They don't view themselves as non-English. They agree to follow the will of the majority. And like I said, the reason it's significant, it sets that precedent, sorry about that, for self-government in the American colonies. We see several things that will do that. So Plymouth is the first of the Puritan New England colonies. The second, the largest by far and the most influential, is Massachusetts Bay Colony. These are the more moderate Puritans that were planning to try to stay in England and purify the church from within. However, they're going to start being persecuted under Charles I. So they get a charter to go start their own colony. Around 1,000 settlers. This is mostly families. So if you look at like ship logs of Virginia versus Massachusetts Bay, Virginia is a lot of young single men, whereas Massachusetts Bay is families with multiple children, grandparents, things like that. Their first governor is John Winthrop. He's going to be governor for 19 years. The settlers, like I said, mainly families, wealthier, more educated communities, are all built around the church. The Congregational Church is going to be the basis for all parts of life in Massachusetts Bay. So both the Plymouth settlers and Massachusetts Bay are examples of the Great Puritan Migration. So it's this decade-long period where, due to persecution in England, Puritans are leaving to come either to the colonies. So 20,000 of them end up coming to New England. Others go to the Chesapeake. Some go to the West Indies, to these sugar islands. But they are leaving England in mass numbers because they are being persecuted in England. So there's John Winthrop. He's the governor of Massachusetts Bay, there is zero religious toleration. We said in the southern colonies, they all had some degree of toleration, not the case in New England at all. Either you were a Puritan or you got kicked out. That's all there was. This one is the largest and most influential. Pretty famous document. It's an address given by John Winthrop on board the Arabella, their ship, when they were coming over. And it's called the City Upon a Hill speech, where he talks about, obviously a reference to the Bible, where they are going to be the model Christian society, that they believe God has ensured the success of their colony. Others will look to them in the future as the model of how to structure your society to be successful. So if you see that document, I can see it being a stimulus as well for a multiple choice or in a DBQ. That is John Winthrop talking about his vision for Massachusetts Bay and what they're going to be. So we said the church is the center of everything. They do have some form of self-government, so they have town meetings, town government. However, it is not a democracy. Sometimes you see confusing questions about democracy in Massachusetts Bay. Yes, you could participate in town government if you were a member of the church, a male, and a property owner. So that's really pretty limited as far as who's getting a say. Yes, they have some form of government, but it is by far not a democracy. As you can imagine, if the whole society is based around the church, the leaders of the church are going to have a huge influence. So clergy had a major role in society in Massachusetts Bay. They determined whether or not you were one of the visible saints. They could decide if you had experienced conversion and therefore were a member of the church. There's a lot of fiery pastors. This one, his name's John Cotton, that were like celebrities almost in the Bay Colony. They didn't have absolute power though, because the people were able to choose who were in those high-ranking positions. So you couldn't just do whatever you want and make everybody mad, because you have to keep your popularity to keep your position. There are laws to enforce moral codes. So drinking, gambling, dancing, all of these bad things for Puritans would be outlawed in these Puritan New England colonies. So there are several people, we said, if you're not Puritan, you are not welcome in Massachusetts Bay. Quakers, we'll talk more about them in a little bit. They are not welcome. There's two people you need to know that are going to challenge the authority in the church in Massachusetts Bay. And we call them dissenters because they're fighting back against the church. The first is Anne Hutchinson. She challenged, predestination. It's called antinomianism. Say that 5 times fast. But it's heresy. Like, the things she's saying, and she's a woman, so I'm sure that plays into part of it. So she's banished by the leaders of Massachusetts Bay. Her family, it's very sad, her whole family, she had like 11 kids. Her whole family and herself, all but one of her children, are all killed by Indians in New York. So kind of a sad end to Anne Hutchinson. But she's the first of the 2 notable people to be kicked out of Massachusetts Bay. The second is Roger Williams. He is an extreme separatist to the point that he doesn't think the government should be able to regulate religion at all, which is the whole basis of society in Massachusetts Bay. So he's kicked out. He's expelled. He escapes to what will become Rhode Island and founds his own colony. So he gets kicked out, makes a deal with Native Americans to purchase land to form his own colony. So we call him R-Dub. There he is. He has a pretty sweet mustache there. Rhode Island is by far the most liberal independent colony of all the colonies. We said North Carolina is kind of the hillbilly outlier one. This one kind of goes with that as far as not being like the others. This one is just totally different. Total religious toleration. Anyone could come there. It did not matter if you were religious or not, Jewish, Catholic, atheist, doesn't matter. They called it Rogues Island because all these outcasts from all the other colonies that didn't fit in there or got kicked out of Massachusetts Bay could come to Rhode Island and do whatever they wanted. And much to the dismay of Massachusetts Bay, they get their own charter to become an official colony in 1644. So they are a real colony at that point. Other colonies, Connecticut is actually 2, and they end up merging into one Connecticut colony. At first it is Hartford. Another example of that early self-government, Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. It's basically a constitution similar to what we're going to see after the Revolution that allows for self-government in this Hartford colony. New Haven is the other settlement. It's also Puritan, and those two end up merging under one Connecticut charter. So when we say Connecticut, it's really including both of those there. And these are also Puritan New England, not nearly the size or influence of Massachusetts Bay. There's New Haven. Of course, it's the home to Yale University. Very, very pretty. It is the third oldest university in the United States. So in New England, you would think, since they're based around religion and the church, that they would not have these bloody skirmishes with Native Americans, but that is not true. There are several examples in New England, just like we saw the Anglo-Powhatan Wars in Virginia, we see clashes in New England as well. So disease had already killed off about 75%. So those that are left are the ones fighting in these wars with the English. The Pequot War is the first. The English really annihilate the Pequot Indians. After this war, there's 40 years of peace, basically, because there's not enough of them left to even be a threat. After the Pequot War, there are some English that attempt to convert the remaining natives in these praying towns. It's one of the very few examples we see of the English even attempting or pretending to attempt to convert natives. We know that was a big theme with the Spanish, not so much. And it's not very effective at all, but it is one of the few examples of that. Next is King Philip's War, probably the more notable example of wars in New England between English and the natives. King Philip, his real name's Metacom. They call him King Philip. He takes like an English name. He leads raids against the English, some pretty bloody attacks on Puritan towns in New England. War ensues. In the end, Metacom is killed. It's pretty gory what they do to him. He's drawn and quartered, and the 4 pieces of his body are hung in trees, and they take his head and display it on a spike at the front of Plymouth for 25 years. So his head was on a spike for 25 years. Either way, effects of this, it slows the English settlement because they're fearful. They're scared after these attacks on the towns on the outskirts. And it's the last of the major Indian wars in New England. After King Philip's War, we don't see a whole lot of these anymore. So definitely know this one. That's why it's in red. Okay, next, New England Confederation. I put good because it gets a little confusing. So we have the New England Confederation, then we have the Dominion of New England. This one is good, next one is bad. So this, I want you to think of it like a Puritan club. It's all of the Puritan colonies getting together, working together for their mutual good. So Massachusetts Bay, Plymouth, the 2 Connecticut settlements, New Haven, here we are. So here we are. Not Rhode Island. They don't let Rhode Island in. Or Maine, because it's not a thing yet. So purpose of this, the English are distracted. They're having civil war, so they don't have time to defend their colonies. So they band together for mutual defense against the Indians. Significant because it's a first step towards unity. Delegates working together, things that we're going to see as they start to oppose the British in the coming decades. So those are important first steps toward colonial unity. Dominion of New England. So this is bad. This is when the crown in England decides to reassert their control over the colonies. So Charles II is restored to the throne. He groups the New England colonies plus New York and New Jersey into what he calls the Dominion of New England. He appoints his own people to oversee that. So it's basically like royal control over the colonies, which they do not appreciate at all. The goal of this, he's enforcing the navigation laws. He doesn't want to let them trade with other countries. Remember, for mercantilism to work, you can only trade with the mother country. And defense against Indians. But it is not going to be liked at all by the colonies affected by this. So the governor, he's hated a lot by the colonists, Sir Edmund Andros. He ends town meetings. He suppresses smuggling. So basically all of these freedoms that they'd gotten used to having, he comes in and cracks down on them. So that's why they don't like it. In 1688, we have the Glorious Revolution. In England, William and Mary take the throne, and we re-enter this period, what we call salutary neglect, which sounds like a bad thing, but it's actually good for the colonists because it means England is leaving them alone, letting them trade with whoever they want. part of the reason that it's not going to go well when they start enforcing these again after the French and Indian War. So Dominion of New England is bad, but it goes away after the Glorious Revolution. All right, to finish up, we have the Dutch. We haven't talked much about them. They basically own what is now New York. They had founded New Netherland. So just like the English have New England, the Dutch have New Netherland, mainly for the fur trade. They live on these patroon ships. It's very aristocratic. There's a large feudal estates, and you can get more land if you bring people over. The city itself is called New Amsterdam. It's what is now New York City. They bought it for $24. So what is now Manhattan was purchased initially for $24 for the purpose of making the Dutch West India Company rich. That's the whole point of their colony on the Hudson River. England decides they want it, so the king gives this land to his brother, the Duke of York, and says, go get it, it's yours. So they send a fleet to make the Dutch surrender, and they do, without a fight. This is the leader, his name's Peter Stuyvesant, and he actually had a peg leg, which is kind of interesting. But the Duke of York rides into New York and says, oh, this is mine now, thank you. And they surrender without a fight. So sadly, he loses his land. So that's really the end of the Dutch presence in the colonies, and that's how we came, or the English came to acquire New York. So the middle colonies, this is our last region. So we hit southern New England, now the middle. It consists of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. Characteristics of the middle colonies: they are very fertile. They have a bunch of cereal crops, so like wheat and grain, call them the breadbasket colonies. They have rivers for trade, forests, so they're really rich in natural resources. Ethnically mixed. Part of the reason for that is Pennsylvania is so diverse. The largest amounts of religious tolerance and democracy in the colonies. So compared to the very aristocratic southern colonies, the very Puritan New England, they kind of fall in the middle of that as far as tolerance. And lots of good land is available. So that's part of the reason they can grow all those crops. Quakers, they are hated. That's all you really need to know about them. They're severely disliked in England, just the way they view society. They don't respect titles, which is very important in English society. This is a big one. They are the first abolitionists. Even before we see any other major group speaking out against slavery, the Quakers are really going to be the first to do that, which is another thing that makes them unpopular, especially with Southern farmers. So William Penn, there he is, looks like the guy on your oatmeal, Quaker Oats. He gets a land grant from the king because of a debt that was owed to his father, and he creates Pennsylvania. It becomes this haven for anyone who is being oppressed or persecuted. It's this experiment in liberal government. He tries to possibly turn a profit. He sends advertisements in Europe. So everything about Pennsylvania is just different from what we see with the other 12 colonies. And he pays the Indians for the land for Philadelphia, which opens up positive relations, unlike what we're seeing in New England and Virginia with the local natives. Other things about Pennsylvania, it's very tolerant. There's freedom of worship. Anyone could come there. It grows very quickly with different groups. We have Scots, Irish, Germans all coming. This is a pretty famous painting. This is him supposedly paying for the land. There's William Penn right there, paying the natives and negotiating for the land instead of just taking it, which is what pretty much everyone else did. So there are the 13 colonies. We've got New England, Middle, Southern. For this, what I would be able to do is give specifics, examples for each region about their economy, their tolerance for religion, what types of settlers are coming there, what they're growing there, and just be able to compare and contrast really what is going on in the early years of each of these regions. So that is it. Send me an email or let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you later.